Welcome to our executive interview series at the Trellix Cybersecurity Summit, presented by FedScoop and CyberScoop. I'm Wyatt Cash, and we're here with John Fokker, Head of Threat Intelligence and Principal Engineer at Trellix. John, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to get your perspective on what you see as some of the biggest challenges that public sector organizations are facing in trying to defend against the expanding attack surface, not only across their organizations, but across the extended software supply chain.
That's a great question, and that sounds like a mouthful. But well, in my day-to-day job, I run threat intelligence. So I look at the threats that are out there in the world, and there's four things that really stand out that I think, like, public sector, but basically any organization needs to take note. That is nation-state attacks and how they're morphing. It is the rise of AI. It is ransomware and supply chain. When we look at the nation-state attacks, it has been evolving from the more known APT attacks that are low and slow, we might call, and they stay in the network and they have crafted software that they specifically made themselves, to actually, what we've now recently learned, third-party contractors, hacking groups for hire that develop software for governments that they will use offensively. So it's becoming more and more murky. And mind you, also cyber criminals are stepping into that realm as well, where we have cyber criminals that historically have a financial gain, are now operating in a gray zone area where they might find information during their normal operations and give that back to a hostile administration. When we look at ransomware, that needs no introduction, right? That's been around for many years, and we've seen it go from consumer-based ransomware, so they encrypt your home computer, to paralyzing complete organizations. And especially when I look at the public sector, and especially the public sector in the US, they have been hit with their fair share of ransomware attacks. And it requires a very in-depth security strategy to make sure that you're protected against these threats. It's not a simple antivirus. You need to take some very, very good precautions. And when we look at public sector organizations, it's not always easy to get that budget because, it's not visible. It very often is very hard to justify that budget. Then Gen AI. It's been around. We've seen it around internally in the Advanced Research Center at Trellix. We used it as well. We use it to accelerate our investigations, get better summaries, help us with analyzing code. But guess what? The threat actors are using it too. They're using it to find exploits in software, to craft the perfect phishing email, which is the most simplest form. But they're also looking at enhancing their deepfake generation capability. So what we've been seeing is that in the Western society, there has been some really, really good talks about, okay, do we put some guardrails on AI? Where there's other parts in the world where it's more flexible. And we see cyber criminals reaching out and keeping an eye. They're looking at those parts of the world where the development happens for a financial gain for them, for a nefarious or malicious purpose. So these are some of the things that, I forgot supply chain. Supply chain is a really, really interesting element as well when we look at it, because it makes it hard. It's not only the supply chain of your immediate suppliers who get your router, who's your antivirus vendor, your security vendor, all these things, but it goes much deeper. It also goes into the software. It has this piece of software being coded with a library that is vulnerable, that is being attacked. And what we see is that threat actors are actively looking for vulnerabilities, maybe even generated with Gen AI or fused with Gen AI. And the road from initially finding it to exploiting it, that time frame has gotten much, much shorter. We talk in a couple of years from days up to hours. So most of the large breaches that we see that are actually the result of a vulnerability that's being exploited, the vulnerability gets announced, found, and within hours there's an exploit and you see the first signs of exploitation. So organizations need to be very aware about this, and they need to know who their third-party suppliers are. And to a certain extent, it's a real challenge to understand what kind of software libraries are used by those third-party suppliers, or what do you have in-house as well, to be able to react in that same speed that is needed to combat these threats.
Well, John, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to share your perspectives with us here at the Trellix Cybersecurity Summit.
Thank you.